It's so nice to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you for
Likewise.
that beautiful, stimulating, amazing sermon. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you first, I think I know this a bit from reading your book, but could you tell us how you became a scholar of, a devotee to the Black Madonnas? Can you just give us a little background on that?
Sure. I think my journey to the Black Madonna is similar to ones that I've read across history and around the globe. Desperation. I was reeling from just the pain of awakening to my own sacredness as a Black person through the Black Lives Matter movement, awakening to the pain and the sacredness of being a woman through the Me Too movement, and just really longing for a divine being who could relate to my Blackness and my femaleness. And so I just started searching for any images of the divine. And it started with a Google search. But the moment I first laid eyes on her on Google, my whole body exhaled. I think maybe for the first time in my whole life, I realized I'd been holding my breath until I saw her. And then I knew all these questions I had about being sacred, about my voice mattering, about my body mattering, about my life mattering, about my own wisdom mattering. All those questions were led to her and were affirmed in her.
So similar to how you spoke about the Black Madonna being remembered, she also
Mhm.
helped you to remember
Mhm.
yourself back together.
100%, 100%, especially because as I got to know the stories about the Black Madonna and the ways that people have interacted with her around the world, she's incredibly embodied. Um, there's a reason why people pilgrimage to the Black Madonnas often. And actually, the Black Madonna of Montserrat is the second most popular / visited pilgrimage spot in all of Christianity across time, like to that particular Black Madonna. The only pilgrimage that's been more um, popular is the Camino de Santiago, on of which there are 13 Black Madonnas along it, which is part of the reason why it's so powerful. And it starts at a Black Madonna in France. So yeah.
When I hear you talk about she who cherishes our hot mess, I have a lot of hot mess that needs to be cherished. But it makes me think, Christina, about you know the scene between Celie and Suge Avery in Color Purple. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to get that white patriarchal God, if you will, off our off our eyeballs
Mm-hmm.
in order to, let's say, see who God really is. Can you help us imagine a world that would be shaped by? I'm thinking about the excerpt you wrote. Um, the answer to the question of what it means to be seen and valued and loved.
Mm-hmm.
Describe a world, we're having an echo left, but a world in which the Black Madonna supersedes, replaces the white patriarchal God. How would our systems be? What do you dream of?
Well, thankfully, I don't have to just imagine that, because across history there are lots of examples of matriarchal societies that were organized around need. Oftentimes people think matriarchy is just the inversion of patriarchy, which it isn't. If you think about a patriarchal society, which we're all familiar with, it's all about competition and production. And the society is organized around that, around violence and production. But in matriarchal societies, it's not that like women run everything. It's that the societies are organized around need and meeting people's needs. And to be a human, like the definition of being a human in matriarchal societies is to be a caregiver, regardless of your gender. That's what it means to be human, not a producer, not a victor, but a caregiver. And so it's actually easy to imagine that, because I've read about societies across history that have lived that out, got old goddess societies before the patriarchal god showed up. Yeah.
there has been such a concerted effort to convince us, as you say so well, Dr. C, I'm going to call you Dr. C, Christena, this moment, to uh, put a facade on ourselves, a false self out there in the world.
Mhm.
And that false self, that patina, is designed to hide our misfitness, if you will, right? Our misfit toyness. I was recently out with some colleagues and just sort of showed my vulnerabilities with tears and some f-bombs, to be honest. And I think it was startling to some of the folks. I wonder if you could say a word about what we gain when we reveal our misfitness, our need, our broken spaces, our prickly bits. What do we gain
Mhm.
when we are vulnerable in that way?
Well, I feel like from my personal experience, what I've gained is clarity because there are a lot. I grew up in all sorts of communities, especially spiritual communities, but also as academic communities that claimed that they loved me, that we're family, that we got you, that, and to actually show up with my need has helped me to see who's for real and who's not.
Mm,
And so I think one of the things is just clarity, because part of the reason why I was constantly gaslighting myself and constantly afraid and constantly playing God is because I intrinsically knew I couldn't trust these people.
mhm,
And
mhm.
even though I'm being told to trust and I'm being told to be open and being told to be vulnerable, these folks have not earned the right
Wow.
for that. So
Mhm.
if at the very base, at the very basic, it's like you get to see who's real and who's not in your life. I think another thing that it reveals is how it feels to not be held.
Mm.
And that has made me double down on my efforts to, for example, exorcise and continually heal the transphobia within me. Because I know what it's like to show up and say, this is who I am. And for people to be like, yeah, no.
Right.
And so I think like sometimes just being vulnerable teaches us who we want to be and who we want to be around. But then also that magic of being held, I think is really like Our Lady of the Sick. She shares our hot mess is offering to us. She's saying this can happen if you're brave enough to know your truth, speak your truth, and connect with the people who can hold space for your truth. There's a book that's been living in me called Incantations for Rest by Tina O'Danner, who's a Black UU minister, and she says, I will choose to collaborate with people who can hold what I put down.
Mm.
And if people ask me like, what's your spirituality? I'm like, it's that. Like I will choose to collaborate. I will choose to be in a relationship with people who can hold what I put down. And I will choose to be a person who's committed to holding what other people put down, which means I have to deal with my biases. I have to deal with my false selves. I have to deal with my shame. Just yesterday, I apologized to a friend for saying something flippant that really was out of my shame, but it was about him. And so just realizing that was me carrying my mess into this situation and it landed on you. But it's these opportunities of realness that allow us to experience true love. Yeah.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Um,
morning.
I've been thinking of just resonating with some things since listening to your message this morning. One of them is just this idea of your needs being gift. Like you said, like when we bring our needs, that actually is our spiritual gift. That's our spiritual offering instead of something that then um, needs to be dealt with or fixed in a certain way, but just our needs are the thing, are the offering. I think that's really beautiful, and I'm going to be resonating with that for a while. And the second is with this idea that Natalie kind of picked on at the beginning here as well, and that is of remembering the remembering of Our Lady of the Six head, and that also makes me think of the Holy Eucharist. When we
Mm.
gather in communion and we say, remember, there is always this double meaning of that. Remember in a headspace, in a time space, but also a literal remembering of all of the things in society that are broken and that need to be put back together. So I've been thinking about the Holy Eucharist as it relates to the Black Madonna this morning as well. And then one other thing, I'll just put back there and let you respond with whatever you're feeling. And that is just kind of how we wrestle with this white patriarchal God that we know so much of this country specifically worships and still, believes in and thinks is the only God, the white male patriarchal God. And I'm wondering how that is, in your opinion, influencing this specific political moment. I have some thoughts on that, but would love to hear you as well. And how do we be intentional about naming that and helping this country decolonize from that, move away from that as a way to heal ourselves in this only political system that we have right now?
That's a big question. Thank you, for all those reflections. And I mean, the white patriarchal God, I call him white male God in my book, is on the money. Is on the dollar bill. It says, "In God we trust," and that's the God that we serve. So he's everywhere. I think what just to kind of like grab hold of one little piece of it, and I think a piece that it impacts me is I think those of us who are aware of this God's influence and those of us who are maybe rebel fighters I think that white male God wants us to believe the lie that we need everyone on our side, that we need to convince everyone in order for there to be change. When I think the sacred Black feminine, I think liberation theologies would say it's the remnant, it's the mustard seed. Very early on in my journey of awakening, I was obsessed with Palestinian liberation theology, and I would read an hour every night as like my lullaby because their theology around the mustard seed is just so powerful. And so I think what resonates with me is how much work do I need to do to maintain connection to abundance so that I don't get lost in the overwhelm of it all. I think that's the message of the Black Madonna, is that as much as that is true, so is abundance. And so what am I doing to connect with that? And I remember being in Nablus in the West Bank a few years ago and listening to some Palestinian activists, and they said, hopelessness and despair are luxuries of the bourgeoisie. And so if you're feeling that, just know there's another reality. And so my work as someone who's connected to the divine feminine, who's like, I mean, what's interesting that all these Black Madonnas are either around streams or like waterfalls or springs or oceans. And it's like this idea that they're an ever flowing source. It's the source without source. It's always flowing. And we get to choose which flow we drop into. The one of the 24-hour news cycle or the one of abundance, 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 abundance. You can do it. You can see it. You can love it. You can be with it. You can keep going. And I think that's the kind of charge for these days. This, change can happen if we keep going.
I love that answer. Now you have a question.
I'm not sure if this is a question. I'm just going to say a lot of things. But I have most recently been thinking about, I spent a season fighting savagely for my joy. Like that was the thing that I was trying to reclaim. And I think in the midst of that poem in For Color Girls Who Consider Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, somebody almost walked off with all of my stuff. Like what was I not a good steward of, I guess, while I was paying attention to this other thing, right? So I've been curious about like, has my softness been stolen? Has my authentic reaction been stolen? Right? Because I'm like, you don't deserve my anger. This isn't even, I'm fighting savagely for my joy. Or, you know, like it's been this sort of thing. And I'm curious. I just am really stuck, as you can tell, on the remembering of ourselves and what we gave away in order to do some other work that was rightly necessary, right, at the time, but how we balance ourselves.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot with the word titrate in my healing journey, triage, like, and giving myself space to have those seasons where I'm fighting savagely for my joy, and being okay with the fact that maybe some other things are not in balance. Because I think one of the things that connecting to the Black Madonna has helped me is I get to stop holding myself. I don't have to be balanced. I don't have to. It's okay to focus on one thing, even if that means neglecting something else, because she's holding it. And like a lot of Black women, and also a lot of women who've grown up in evangelical spaces, I have pelvic floor dysfunction. I've been holding my pelvic floor in too tight my whole life, and it's starting to show up in my body. And so the journey of going to physical therapy and the journey of learning to breathe and release myself, pelvic floor, has reminded me I actually believe in a divine being now who I can trust, and I can actually stop holding myself and juggling all the balls and holding everything. And so I think like the questions I would ask myself is like, okay, I've been really working on joy this whole time. Like, what is she inviting? What has she been holding that now I can just receive? And also like the question of fighting for my joy. I love I think that's something that is a natural impulse for me too. I'm such a strategic planner, and just so good at, society says you can't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And, that kind of stuff. And I have a banner that I bought in 2017 in my house that says joy is an act of resistance. Right. And so I was like, I'm going to have joy. God damn it. No matter what, like you can't feel my joy. Yeah. And also, but then there's Our Lady of Least, who's Our Lady of Joy, who outside Paris, about a couple hours outside Paris. And so then I can go and sit at her feet and be like, okay, you already got the joy. How do I just drop in to the flow? That I'm not trying for this, because you already are offering it. But so what's that? What does that look like for me? And so I think that's I feel like it's helping me to rewire everything I think I know about spiritual growth. Because I can memorize some scripture, and I can show up for all night prayer, and I can serve. I mean, I will be at church at 6 a.m. making coffee. I will do all the things. And then the question is, what is she offering? And how can I just like dip in that spring? Yeah.
Right. How do we just like accept that versus like even the language fighting savagely, versus just like accepting and knowing that this is intrinsic. I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Like, it's already there. I don't have to be so aggressive. It's going to be in my body and as part of who I already am naturally. And so how much in my fighting am I actually in the way of receiving? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also like what really speaks to me is like these stories of these Black Madonnas being remembered, being put back together. It was the community that did that. And so a lot of times, like when I need some hope, when I need to dream, when I need encouragement, I'll get all my friends on a Zoom, and I made up a game called We Have a Dream. where I will say just like the headline, like, hey, I have a dream that Black women and other people who have uteruses are able to bear their children safely in our society. And then and then a friend will like just take that one line and interpret that dream with her body and with sound. So just do like a whole dance on the screen. And then the next friend will take the like embodiment and then speak it out in English and just say, this is what I see. And then the next friend will say, yes, and add more to it. And all I had to do was just show up with the line, the headline. And then it's like, I've invited all my friends into helping me connect with this longing that I have. I didn't just do it on my own. And so I've made up a bunch of games like that so that I can help my community connect with what I need and vice versa, you know. So, but it's that those are things I've had to make up because there aren't, you know, this is not how we do church, or this isn't how we do accountability group or whatever, you know. So.
That's very womanish of you.
Also womanish. Christena, when I hear you say that, you know, my study is psychology of religion, and one of the things about that is like identity development and objects. So let me just like the objects. The first object is the passive. The first object is your mother's breast. Whoever breastfeeds you or the bottle. The pacifier is an object that becomes inside you, right? You bring inside yourself the object called nurture. Making sense? You bring inside yourself the object called comfort, because that's your blanket or your teddy bear. Like my grandchildren, they lose their bear, like, oh, it's over, because the object that represents the comfort, right? So when you're talking about the Madonnas holding the parts of us, the objects of us, the parts of us that are not yet fully inside us, the things we yearn for, fighting fiercely for our joy, you know, those objects are out there in your communities, in the world for us to have, and we don't have to have them all inside us, right? But they're also already inside us, is where I'm trying to push to. Like the joy is inside us, the fierce love is inside us, the pathos is inside us, the grief is inside us, the power is inside us, the vulnerability is inside us, the sickness is inside us, and the vulnerability is inside of us, right? The brokenness, right? How, I think to myself, abundance would mean knowing that those objects are inside. Sometimes smaller than others, sometimes more diminished than others, but at other times showing up the way we need it. Like, in other words, we are God-like in the way all of these objects are inside of us. And what happened with white man God, white male patriarchal God, asshole God, is the goodness that we already had and knew we had in matriarchal cultures, we projected onto that God. That God gets the power, that God gets the glory, that God gets the peace, that God gets the everything, the armies, the whole host of angels and whatever, and we're just little peons, little worms, waiting for God to bless us. Is that too much? That's what I think. That we have.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it's all in us. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's been so powerful for me in encountering the Black Madonna is realizing I'm sacred too.
Yes.
Like everything that's good is already in me.
Yes.
Everything that's good is already in me and is already in everyone. And it's worth finding. It's worth being curious about. It's worth, you know, why has it been buried? You know, I was taught so much, you know, if I'm being naughty or if something is coming out that's not holy, that it's because I'm this inherently bad person. And I think Clarissa Pinkola Estes's work on the Black Madonna has really helped me because she says, well, if something, quote, unholy, unquote, is coming out of you, it just means that you're being invited into deeper communion with all that is good within you. Like that. Like it's buried, and why has it been buried? Maybe it's because of abuse, or maybe it's because of neglect. And again, these aren't necessarily things that are intrinsic to who I am. And so I think it's such an opportunity to reclaim our intrinsic birthright holiness. And I think as a Black person and as a woman, I've been taught over and over again, I'm unholy inherently. Yeah.
Think of the revolution we would have. And I'm going to toss this to Natalie and Amanda to respond, but we're in this whole couple of projects about our children. We've got grants to raise our children with love. And if we're raising imagination, or if we're using art to change the stories, what would happen if instead of teaching our little ones, you ain't nothing until you get right with God? If we were teaching, you are perfect really in the sight of God, and everything else that's coming is just going to be more you in relationship to the holy, right? How could we raise that? Just asking you all to say something, and then we'll ask Christena to say something to close. But what would happen? The revolution we'd have if Christian education meant baptizing the children into the holiness and power that they already have, not to shame them, but to affirm them. Amanda and then Natalie, what do you all think about that?
Yes, I think that's a beautiful dream. And I would love to get on a Zoom and do what Dr. Cleveland was saying, and we can like live it out with you and dance. I do think we attempt to do that here, right? Like that's part of what we're doing with Freedom Summers and with having children down here during the message say, what does it mean to be femme? What does it mean to be a woman? For someone even to say a preacher, is really powerful, because not all children have an idea of a woman, a Black woman, to be a preacher. As a white mother raising white kids, I think I first, yes, want to be able to have, the children in my home understand that they also have divinity in themselves and are divine. And maybe more importantly, so does your Black friend at school. And so does the friend who's not white at school, because whiteness is so pervasive. And so there's this, I don't know if duality is the right word, but that's what's coming to me right now, where it's, yes, you are beautiful and perfect, and you have white skin, and so is everyone else. And I think that is the piece that that I need to make sure to bring about in conversations and in representation, and the way that we can spend time and money and ask questions.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pivot just a bit from like the education maybe it's still in the education. I am an aunt and I am a godmother, and I do believe that it takes a village. And in that, I think that my effect in who I'm teaching is not just the children, but also, particularly as a Black woman, how do we do the actual raising of our children, so that it's not in response to white supremacy. So thinking back about like the spankings and like a lot of that stems from I do it here so that you don't go out into the world and get beat. And is there another way that we can raise our children so that they do feel their divinity and also know how to navigate a world that does not love them? That's really like the conversations I try to have with the brown children that the Black and brown children that are in my circle, but also the white children that are in my circle. And then how do all of those messages meet each other, because it's different here than it is there, and where do they intersect? So that then we are actually shifting just a little bit more away from white supremacy.
Christena, do you want to give us a final, this is what I wish y'all would take away type of thought? And then maybe I'll give a blessing. And we're so grateful to you for bringing your full, beautiful, amazing brilliance. Thank you.
Thank you. If it's okay to take a couple minutes, I want to share about a Black Madonna that I just learned about in December when I was in France, because I think I can't stop thinking about her. And I think it maybe relates to this conversation that we're having. Um, my Airbnb host was the hostess with the mostest. I've never had an Airbnb host like this, but she was constantly doing research on her own in the French language on Black Madonnas, and then bringing this research to me and helping me with my work. And she found out about this really obscure Black Madonna who lives in this tiny village about an hour from where I stay in France. And I'd never even heard of her. That's how obscure she is, which is pretty amazing because I've been researching her a long time. And she recently became a big news story in the area because, like the Black Madonna Vichy, she was stolen during the French Revolution, and then about 50 years after the revolution, they found her body in a barrel full of ashes, buried under the ground, and her Christ child was missing. And they assumed he had just been burned up. And so what they did is they took her body back, restored it, and then built her a new Christ child. And so since the early, since for about a couple hundred years or so, she's been in this church in this tiny village. Fast forward to this time last year, and this random antique dealer was going through a ho hum run of the mill estate sale, and he finds this Christ child all by itself, and it's just like, this is special, this is unique. I don't know what's special about it, but I know this is different from what I usually come across. So he sends it off to like the French Department of History and Antiques or whatever, and they examine this Christ child and determine him to be the missing Christ child from 200 years ago of this Black Madonna who was found in the barrel of ashes.
Wow.
So my Airbnb host is like, let's go see this Black Madonna. I'm off on Saturday. I'm picking you up at 2 o'clock. And so we drive out to this tiny village that has like 20 families. We go into the church, and where the altar where the Black Madonna is supposed to be is just empty. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where is she? So then the town has this restaurant. We go over there and we're like, where did the Black Madonna go? And they said, oh, we don't really know. But the mayor lives 2 doors down. Why don't you just knock on the mayor's door and find out what happened? So we go down the street and we knock on the mayor's door. The mayor comes out and tells us, oh, yes. She is being prepared for her reunion with her child. And I was like, what is happening? What does that even mean? And they said after 200 years of being apart and living in different environments in terms of humidity and sunlight and all these other things, we're spending 9 months preparing the mother and the child, slowly changing their environment so that when they come back together and are one, they don't harm each other. And I have so many things to say about that story. They're actually going to be reunited next month. And there's going to be a whole celebration in the village. But one of the things that really comes to mind for me right now is this idea that no matter how long it takes us to find our way, to our community, our loved ones, to find our way home to ourselves, it's happening. It's in process. We haven't been forgotten. As we work out these questions of like, how do I teach the Black children in my life to be soft when they're home and cunning when they're not at home, all those questions that we're throwing up, but how do we do this? Stories like that give me hope that the wisdom of abundance is always coursing through our veins, that even when we think all we have is a barrel of ashes, there's still truth and hope that's coming towards us and refining us and teaching us. And I think that's what I want to leave us with today, is this truth that, people sometimes ask me, do I really believe what MLK said, that the arc of the universe is long, but that it bends towards justice? And sometimes I struggle to believe that because the evidence doesn't always support that. And yet I hear stories like this and I say, yes, it does bend towards love. It does bend towards connection, healing, community. Um, it's there. We just have to be present to it.
So it's beautiful. Amanda, Natalie, anything before I close? Christena, and I'm going to look at you and then look at the rest of the audience out here to say this sermon, this conversation, this vision of a God who loves us, who is a Black woman. I read your book and it just felt so true to me. How we imagine God, how we image God, how we relate to God, rewires our worldview. It just opens up all the possibilities. That theological work, y'all, is so important. And I want to say, as I prepare to thank Dr. Cleveland for coming, one, God already loves you exactly as you are. Anybody who tells you other than that, stop listening to them, because you are beloved, awesomely, wonderfully made in the image of God, exactly as you are. And if you're looking for a community where you can bring your misfit toy feelings or your questions or your hopes or yearnings or desires, this is one. We hope you'll come hang out with us. You can come hang out with us online. This is your digital minister. Her name is Reverend Natalie Renee Perkins. There are goodies on our website, middlechurch.org, and our socials to help you along your spiritual journey, including this resource, where we are curating spaces to reclaim and reframe Christianity, to love God with everything you have, love neighbor as yourself, love, period. Love, period. And everything else is commentary. Christena, you are so smart. I can't wait to come hang out with you in France and do some Black tours. And
Middle church trip.
yeah, let's do that. At least take the women in. Everybody's nodding. So you are a blessing to the universe, and we're so thankful to you. We give God thanks for you. We give the Black Madonnas thanks for you. And we thank you all for staying around and listening to this beautiful conversation. God bless you.
God bless you.